Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. How exactly is Dominic Breazeale going to beat Deontay Wilder on May 18th? Many fans have already written off the underdog's chances of beating the WBC champion, who goes into the fight seeking his 9th title defence since winning the strap in 2015 from Bermans Vern. Breazeale is the heavy underdog, not expected to do a lot in this fight, even though he's a big unit, the same size as Wilder. He's got a similar reach to Wilder, and he can also punch, just like Wilder. And that kind of sums up Wilder's game. He's a guy that relies on the right hand to get guys out of there, hurt them, and then finish them off. And Deontay Wilder is expecting to put the hurt on Breazeale in this fight. But what can Dominic Breazeale do in this fight to actually give himself a better chance of winning? I think one thing that we've already seen that's going to increase his chances is having Virgil Hunter in his corner. He's enlisted the noted trainer for this fight, and I think it's a good move. And hopefully Hunter can actually improve Dominic Breazeale's leaky defense, because that certainly is a worry. He's a sort of fighter that gets into unnecessary wars, often with fighters of a lesser caliber to himself. The Carlos Negron fight back in December needlessly took a lot of punishment in that fight, ultimately got Negron out of there in what was the 9th or 10th round. But it was a fight where he probably should have had it over Negron earlier in the fight, but he just couldn't seem to stop getting hit. And he can't afford that in this fight. So defense is going to be a key for Dominic Breazeale in this fight, because if he can't display any defensive prowess, well, he's going to eventually eat one shot too many and get knocked out. But it's on the offensive end where he's really going to have to put it on Deontay Wilder. I think we all know that this is going to be his best shot at winning the fight, and I don't think it would just be a lucky punch that's going to do it. He's going to need to go in there with a plan. And before I get to some of my thoughts on what I think he should do, I think it's worth just having a look at his social media, some of the stuff that he's been posting, just to see whether we can take any clues out of this, what he's been doing in general with his preparations. He's been building to this fight for the best part of a year and a half now. Actually, the best part of 2 years, since he got into an altercation with Deontay Wilder in February 2017. He was on Wilder's undercard. He was fighting Izu Agono, got into it with Wilder and Wilder's entourage, including Wilder's brother, after the fight. And that's kind of the genesis for some of the bad blood that is between the two men for this fight. Although I think in reality is some of the bad blood being played up a little bit to sort of ham it up, because obviously this is a fight where a lot of fans didn't necessarily want to see it. It was sort of foisted upon fans when Tyson Fury pulled out of the rematch with Deontay Wilder. So I think some of that bad blood aspect has been sort of, dredged up to try actually give a bit more interest for the fight. And in general, it's been a relatively quiet and sedate build-up. Very few statements, very few clips have come out from either guy of any controversial nature. Even the training clips from Deontay Wilder, there hasn't been many of them, although there is one that Wilder's put out, which I'll play at the end of the video, where he's dodging cones. It's and they're getting thrown, I thought, quite slowly, and this is a little bit here on screen here. I'll play the rest later, but I kind of thought that, is that they expecting the punches that Breazeale throws to be thrown at the same speed? Because they weren't exactly being fired in there quickly either. But Dominic Breazeale, he does have the desire to win this fight, but desire is probably not going to be enough. But on his social media, you can actually see here he's had some sparring work from Tony Yoka. And Yoka is a 6'7" guy, similar height to Wilder, similar athleticism. Yoka, he moves like a gazelle around the ring, but obviously he doesn't have the sort of noted punching power of a Deontay Wilder. And Yoka is the former Olympic champion from Rio 2016. He's actually currently on a ban for missing drug testing in France. Although he didn't fail the drug test, he missed multiple testing opportunities, didn't update the authorities on his whereabouts. And one of those occasions, he was actually overseas sparring with Joseph Parker. And the other guy here on screen is a guy called Rafael Rios. So he's about 6'6". He's got a record of 8-2. Can't say I'm that familiar with him, but I think for sparring purposes, he's probably a big unit, going to give Breazeale some work. Probably one of a number of guys like Yoka who's been helping Breazeale out in camp. And I actually thought that Dominic Breazeale, just looking at him here, although he's got a sort of baggy t-shirt on, it did look like he was in relatively good shape ahead of this fight, that he's been putting in the work. His face looks a little bit slimmer swimmer here, so maybe we'll see on fight night he'll come in somewhere around between 250 and 255. He was about 255 pounds for the Anthony Joshua fight, and some of these other clips here, this one here where he's hitting or a tennis ball, from his head, that sort of thing. If you just look at him here, I think he does look like he's in pretty decent shape, or at least decent shape for Dominic Breazeale. More recently, he's sort of been somewhere between 255 and 270, bouncing around a little bit. So he was, I'll just go to his box rec here. He was 256 for the Negron fight, 255 for Molina, 263 for the Ogono fight. That was a real war. And Anthony Joshua and Amir Mansour, he was 255 and 252 respectively. I think somewhere between 252 and 255, it's probably going to be a decent weight for him. And judging by his sort of condition, the sort of look at him, he looks somewhere in that region. It's sort of hard to say. But the other stuff that's generally appeared on social media has been pretty tame sort of stuff. He's done his bit with the initial press conference where he's talked about his desire to stop Wilder. There was some trash talk. Most of the rest of the stuff here has just been the odd clip of him hitting the bag, for example. This one here in slow motion, that's not full speed, even though some people might say it looks like it is for Breazeale. And hitting the speed bag here. It's one of these sorts of things where he's going about his business. It's a sort of under the radar fight to some extent because he's just going about his business in camp now, ready and preparing himself for May 18th. And that question, what can he do to sort of thwart Deontay Wilder? How is he going to actually beat Deontay Wilder? Sort of the big question here, because fans in general aren't expecting much from Dominic Breazeale, although a number do want to see him knock out Deontay Wilder. I think just, a few thoughts of my own on this sort of situation is that Breazeale can't wait. From the opening bell, I think he has to try put the pressure on Wilder to some extent and make him work. Because if he doesn't, Deontay Wilder will do what Deontay Wilder has done in a number of recent fights, which is he will just wait for his moment. He will sort of stay at range. He'll just try to combat whatever you're doing. He'll let you win the opening couple of rounds behind your jab. We saw that against Gerald Washington. We saw that against Luis Ortiz. And eventually he pounced in those fights. And, he was able to time them and land a big right hand. So I don't think it's a situation for this fight where Breazeale can actually afford just to wait. I think he needs to be active. I think he needs to try close the distance with Deontay Wilder. Don't let him stand at range and fire off those long levers and eventually catch you with something big on the side of the head or the side of the chin, because ultimately I think many of us are expecting that to happen. So he can't just sit back, let Wilder dictate the range, let it be a low volume fight, because if you let Deontay Wilder choose and dictate the pace and allow it to be a low volume fight, it will be, and ultimately he's able to conserve his energy there, he's able to pick his spots and ultimately land a right hand at some point. And I think we've seen with Deontay Wilder over the years, against this sort of caliber of opposition, eventually he's going to land something on you over the course of 12 rounds. So if Dominic Breazeale is going to prevent that, he's got to actually go in there with a game plan to try stop Wilder fighting his fight. And I think, it would be in Breazeale's interest to try be busy in those opening rounds when he's fresh, try get up on Wilder, try to be aggressive, try to go to the body, try to break him down a bit, slow him down a bit. But obviously there's a lot of risk involved with that sort of thing. It's easier said than done. And if Dominic Breazeale's not careful, he could walk into a left hook or a right hand or whatever. We know Deontay Wilder doesn't have a massive variety of punches, but against an opponent like Breazeale, who's seen as, a bit slow and plodding and hittable, maybe we could see more of the arsenal on display. He has been saying that he wants to, work on the fundamentals and his technical skills ahead of this fight, and he wants to dominate and really put on a spectacular performance against Breazeale. But maybe that will also allow some openings for Dominic Breazeale. And if Breazeale is given an opportunity to chin Wilder and really land something telling, he will. And we've seen him do that in a number of fights where he's either been behind in a fight or he's been hurt in a fight, and he's still managed to come through after eating a number of shots and land something telling. So it's not just a case of landing a lucky punch, but he's going to have to go in there and put himself in a position to land some punches of note, because if he allows Wilder to dictate the style of the fight, how it plays out, then Breazeale is going to lose 10 times out of 10. He just can't allow Wilder to fight his own fight, because eventually that will only go one way. So Dominic Breazeale with Virgil Hunter in his corner, I hope they come up with a good plan to try work Deontay Wilder over here, show something different, do something different from some of his recent opponents who've been relatively happy to stand off and not try to close the distance. So it'll be interesting to see what Breazeale can or will try to do in there. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.